everybody. It is time again for Influence 2020. I hope you've been excited that we have been bringing you these breakout sessions so that you can get all the information now, because we're going through some crazy times and now is the time we all need our information. And I hope that you are excited for today, because you better have an empty page in your notebook because you are going to fill it. So my name is Tom Singer.
And I'm Liz Green, and it is going to be one of those fast and furious conversations today. So as Tom says, get your pen and paper ready, but also we want to hear your questions. We'd love you to be active in the chat like it's your hallway, but if you actually want us to see a question for Crystal, please put it in the Q&A. We'll be paying attention to that as we go along today. And oh my goodness, we don't want to waste any time. Let's get to it. Tom, tell them about our guest today.
So most people know who she is. She has been so dedicated to NSA. And this year she has been the host of Voices of Experience. And so it is so awesome that she agreed to come on here and share everything. And that is Crystal Washington. Now, for those of you who don't know, Crystal she's a technology strategist and a futurist, which I just love. I wish I was a futurist. I think that sounds so cool. And she works with, doesn't it sound cool? She works with organizations to help them leverage technology to increase their profits and their productivity. So welcome to Influence 2020, Crystal Washington.
Whoa!
There she is. Awesome. Look at that background too. That is fantastic.
Well, yeah, I had to be fancy for my peers. You all are amazing, so I have to get it together.
So thank you so much for joining us here today. I think it is so. There's so many things we're going to talk about, and you're gonna take this down to sort of the simple tactics of all of this. Because is it fair to say that 10 weeks ago, Crystal, if I had run into you in the airport and said Crystal and introduced you to somebody, I wouldn't have said Crystal is an expert on doing virtual presentations?
No, not at all. It's one of those things where I know how to work webinars. I'm a technology strategist, right? So I have to know how to do the things. But the truth of the matter is, Tom, I was in a position that some of our members were in where we kept hearing your business needs a bigger back end. We heard Michelle Villalobos and Simon T. Bailey and Bill Gates and everybody. But that keynote money was coming in and it was fast and furious. And so I kept saying, oh, one day. And boy, did that day pop me in the head.
Well, I think it popped all of us in the head. So
that's true.
So Crystal, let's back up 10 weeks. What does a successful pivot look like? What did you do?
Okay, I'm so glad you asked that question, because I want to make sure we ground this conversation. And anyone who's, everybody who's with us right now, I want you to know that as we go along, there are no inappropriate questions. I figured the best gift I could give everybody would just to be open up my journey as a case study, because I've pivoted. But what does that look like? Okay, so I'm someone, I do a forecast every year. So in December, I do a forecast for the following year. So if I look at my numbers, and this isn't my revenue, but looking at percentages of my goals that I had, what I thought I would make reasonably, I ended March at like 93%. Okay, but remember March was, we still had a little bit in the beginning. April, I was at 51% of where I thought I would be, but that's by the time I started going into virtual. Now, to put that in perspective, when I started looking at my past numbers, even though I was 51% of my goal, I was still like 114% of what I did in 2018, over 100% of the year before. And then this month I'm on track right now at 42% of what my original goal was. So I didn't adjust my goals for virtual. I was like, let's see what happens. And so I'm working more hours than I used to when I was a keynoter, that went in person. But the fact that I'm even able to bring in half as much, and this has nothing to do with the base amount that I need to run my business. It's much lower than all of this. But I want to ground everybody in what this looks like, because I don't want anyone to be in on this conversation and think, oh my gosh, Crystal pivoted. Now she's making 8 times as much as she did before. No, I'm making half as much and working twice as hard. But the money's coming in, right? And so that's why, I just want to make sure I'm grounding everybody in a certain reality here, what this looks like.
Which is why this was entitled Tech and Tactics for Short-Term Survival, right? Because we are all in the business of staying in business at the moment.
Yes, for sure. I mean, that's the hope, right? And I was somebody where I'm a power saver. My husband's a professional photographer, so both of our businesses took a dive. Like we're in the exact same position where it was like, right? Now we had some time because we're super savers, but at the same time, who wants to watch your savings dwindle or the money you put aside for your business dwindle? So, you know, we got to do something, and hopefully by the end of this conversation, you know, I can present maybe some ideas that are helpful. And also relieve some of this anxiety I'm feeling. There's a lot of fear. And I want to kind of calm us down a little bit and ground us in what we can do.
Awesome. So go ahead.
I think one of the things that stresses us out is we look at these people who look like they've made that pivot to virtual well, and they have these glorious setups, and you have this glorious setup with the fancy background and all of that, and we think, how much am I going to need to spend? What do I actually really need to do this well? What do we need to do this well?
So from a technology standpoint, you don't need as much as you think you do. First off, you have to look at who your client is. Okay, so when all the cancellations started rolling in, and we all knew they were coming, right? I mean, reasonably. And actually, I kind of prayed for them. I remember talking to my husband and my assistant once I realized that those of us who, and we all have different speaking business models, so I want to honor that. But those of us who have models like mine where you're constantly in airports, when it hit me that I'd be like the super contagious person, I was like, oh gosh, I can't kill people on accident. So I was literally praying for the rest of my events to cancel. Once we saw those rolling in, I started to see this panic in our industry. And what happened was everybody said, virtual. And so they went out and they tried to figure out, what do I buy? What do I buy? And they all started buying the most expensive equipment, right? Ever known to man. Now, I am married to a photographer, so I'm very lucky, who has some videography experience. So he understands sets and lightings and things like that. I knew I didn't have the proper lights because his lights are different than what you need for video. So I did invest in some good lights, but I didn't create a home studio because my thinking was, well, once they allow us to get out even a little bit, you can rent a studio. Do I really want to do this to my house? And I did convert my living room into a temporary studio. But in terms of technology, think about your clients. Because what I learned very fast is that most of my clients actually didn't want all that. I remember one client, I was like, this is amazing. I can do this and I can be standing and I can have this over here and we can have a set. And the client was like, you know what we would love, Crystal? We would love for you to sit at a chair in front of a laptop. I mean, it just deflated my little dream, okay? But they would pay me to do it, right? So I was like, okay. And then the more quiet I was, because I sat for a minute, I told my husband, I said, I feel like I'm supposed to watch this for a minute and see what happens. So I didn't start to advertise, I do virtual or anything like that. I just waited for a minute. And what happened was after just a few days, clients started calling. Well, let me put it this way. I first started reaching out to people, just making sure they were okay. Okay, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But then clients started saying that they needed webinars. Crystal, can you do a webinar on this? And most of them weren't even my topic, but they weren't far off. It was all technology related. So I thought, okay, what is the base things that I need? And here's what I would suggest you all have. This is the basic that everybody absolutely does need. You need a really good HD camera. Typically the one that is attached to your PC is not going to have the level of clarity that you need. So like Logitech has really good HD cameras. The prices are starting to go down now. At one point they were inflated ridiculously to 4 and 5 times what they were charging. So you get yourself a good quality camera and it'll clip right on your PC. The next thing you need is an external microphone, because the microphone that's on your PC, it's not going to cut it. And there's different types. You know, I have the Blue Yeti that everybody has, but there's many different kinds. You do need an external mic. In addition to that, you need good lighting. Now that might be a ring light, but here's the thing. I get a lot of compliments on my lighting. Y'all, I'm facing a window.
So Crystal, one thing that has already come up on the chat, and we talked about this before we started, so many of us are so used to digital backgrounds and yours is so clear.
Oh, I'm gonna get to that.
You're not using a digital background. Show everybody what you got.
I'll get to that one. Okay. Yeah, I'll get to that one in a minute. I promise. I was going to go in on that one. Okay. So I know people are like, what's the background? So I'm going to do that for y'all. But I have to say these other points first before we get to that one. So we talked about your mic. We talked about your camera. We talked about your lighting, which could be natural light. Do have another external light handy, because if a storm hits, obviously this isn't going to work for me anymore, right? Here's the thing. If you're going to invest money in anything, the thing I would suggest you invest money in is making sure that your internet is as fast as humanly possible. Because if it's not, your camera, your microphone, your lighting, none of it matters if you can make the meeting. So you want to be able to have the fastest possible speed. You want to be wired in, you don't want to do Wi-Fi. You want to make sure that you have a hotspot handy. You don't have to go out and buy a hotspot. You can have your phone. So right now my hotspot is open on 2 devices. So if anything happens where this goes down, I can jump on either one of my devices and continue this Zoom.
That's really smart.
Yeah,
as she opens her hotspot.
And here's the thing, backgrounds, there's many different things you can do. You can change your office. You can build out these beautiful things. But as Tom hinted, what I did was I wanted my presentations to look like a work of art. The same, it's actually opposite of what I did on stage, but for the same purpose. On stage, I wore all black or all white. Or if I was feeling feisty, I wore black and white. And that's because I wanted people to be able to hear my message. I'm speaking on technology, and there's a lot of fear around it and anxiety. And so simplified clothing, they can focus. Well, here it's different. I need to draw them in to pay attention. So for instance, this is not a virtual background, because anyone who doesn't know me, you might not know I actually have an afro. And virtual backgrounds on afros are extra ridiculous. It already does that little bloopy thing to everybody, but my fro disappears. It looks like Maggie Simpson had somebody bite a piece of her hair out. So this is my background right now, y'all. Y'all see that? It has clips. You see it?
And that's just on a foam board.
Yeah, well, actually, no, it's hung on a photography backdrop. So there's clips up there holding it. It's fabric. And it's just hanging down, and it's just clipped in place, and that's all it is. So I didn't have to redesign my office. Yeah, my office is actually nice. I have a nice office. It's clear, but it's nice looking. But I have a bunch of these different backgrounds, so I can play with colors, and just it looks engaging and different. So this isn't amazingly expensive. And those are just the basic things you need. You don't have to run out. And here's the thing. Some people's brands are to have that level of production. I mean, we have people in NSA that are artists, and they're playing instruments, and they're doing all these amazing things, and they're magicians. And so when you have those elements, yes, your production quality has to be higher. And that is a blessing that they're doing that. But if that's not who your client is, don't go spend all that money right now. Do what makes sense for your clients.
That makes a lot of sense. And as you talked about, it's taking a little stress off. And so when your client said, Crystal, could you just sit down in the chair behind your laptop? Then you made it crystallized, right? You made it beautiful and served your client.
Indeed. And I mean, that's the thing. I think you just have to figure out what it is your clients want. I have another client that they did want the set, and we're about to do a video series, and theirs is going to be more involved. And so it was good that I invested in those things for that. But the truth is, most of the clients who have hired me now, they want something simpler. And I also, while we're talking about setting the stage here, I am getting paid to do these. I know there's a whole lot of debate. Do you do it for free? Do you not? Here's me being honest again, just laying it all open. In the very beginning, as I was reaching out, just seeing, are y'all okay, to my existing and even past clients? It had nothing to do with business. They never had to do business with me again. I just wanted to make sure everybody was okay. And one client reached out to me, and this is a client who had hired me for 2 years in a row to be their keynote, which they had never done before with a speaker. I had gotten multiple pieces of spin-off for speaking to them, 2 international. So they came to me, and they were so humble, and they said, Crystal, do you have any kind of webinar video? Even if it's already recorded, we'll take whatever you have. We just need content for our people. Is there anything you have that you'd be willing to share? And they were just so humble. I just said, you know what? I'm going to do 2 webinars for you. We're going to do them live. They're going to be customized to your people. I'm not just tossing out something that's pre-recorded. We're going to do this for you. That is the only free that I've done. Everything else I've been paid for. I've been paid by religious groups. I don't even make a habit of speaking to a lot of religious groups, right? I've been paid by a student group. I don't normally speak to student groups. I've been paid by corporate. I've been paid by association. Actually, I had an association pay me my full fee last week for a 1-hour webinar. So know that there are opportunities out there, and there are people who are paying. And some of them may have came at first with, we know when someone's about to ask for free. You know how the setup is where you already know what's coming? And I kind of chalk them off at the pass, and I say, you know, hey, just let me know what your budget is for your project, because with video, there's so many more options. So it's going to let me know the production value. And it's also going to help me know where I need to put you in the queue, because I have clients that are paying me to do this work. I have already existing clients that are asking for help. So that was the one client I did it for. I said, and then I have some wonderful groups that are approaching me that don't fit in either category. Where are you? And once they hear that, they're like, oh, we have a budget. And they realize you're going to come in last, because if I'm going to do freebies, it's going to be for someone who's already worked with me. I'm not
right.
And I'm not judging what anyone else's decision is. That's just my truth. So that's where we're at. That's the technology I recommend. That's kind of the atmosphere that I'm seeing.
So one real quick question, and you led with this kind of a little earlier, is that you kind of, even for a technologist, you took the attitude that less is more on a lot of this technology. And I think collectively, a lot of people just sighed like in relief. So before we move on from the technology, let's go back to that less is more and kind of give people a little bit of permission to live by that.
Here's my belief, okay? Now, there's all different types of speakers. I'm friends with all kinds of different speakers, even the technology space, right? Mm-hmm. I am probably the one who's the least willing to test a bunch of different things on stage. And there's no right or wrong approach, because our peers that do that, they're known for that, and it's wonderful. I'm the technology person who makes it simple for people. I'm the technology person who's brought in for baby boomers and sometimes even traditionalist groups. So I'm in there sometimes speaking to folks in their 70s and 80s, you know, getting them comfortable. And so for me, it's important that things run. It's important that we minimize potential disasters. That's why I have 2, you know, hotspots open right next to me right now. And so for me, the problem is, the more pieces of technology you have connected that your presentation is dependent upon, the more opportunities for something to go wrong, because any one little thing can cause a whole issue with everything else. And so I'm not saying it's bad to use other technology. It's not bad, but I do believe in keeping it as simplified as possible. And so the technology I use, I have to be very comfortable with. It has to have a small opportunity for error. So, you know, I interviewed Brian Fanzo for Voices of Experience. Mm-hmm. And when he was on there, he was like, you know, Crystal, I know you use Prezi. Have you started using Prezi Video? I was like, no, I didn't know they even released that. And so when I took a look at it, I was like, oh, magic. And it looks great with these backgrounds, by the way. Some of my backgrounds, it looks amazing. So that's something simple that I can add in. It's a beautiful element. It looks engaging. It looks techy. But the truth of the matter is, the opportunity of that having an issue versus external switchers and a whole bunch of other stuff and multiple monitors that you're pulling from is very low. Multiple cameras. I have cameras galore between myself and my husband. I still use one because I'm keeping it. No, seriously, I have a 4K camera sitting next to me right now that I can use in a second. My husband has multiple Nikons. But again, I'm about, for me, keeping it as simple as possible, because at the end of the day, clients don't hire me for experimentation. There's other speakers that do. They hire me to keep people's blood pressure down as I get them to take action on certain pieces of technology. So I need to keep it as simple as possible in terms of ensuring things don't go left.
I like that. On the having the phones with the hotspot on, Rebecca wanted to know, are you also logged into Zoom just in case something happened that you could switch to the phone?
Yes.
Excellent.
Well, not logged into Zoom, because if I logged into, like, I'd be in the room, but I'm in there. I have the links up so I can get into it. Well, okay, there's a couple ways to do it. I see what she's asking. So right now, when I talk about having the hotspot open, it's not so that I could go in the Zoom program and pick it up on here, although I can. Zoom is on both of these phones. It's so that if the internet goes down on my laptop, I can then use the Wi-Fi from this to pull it onto my laptop and it still runs. And my Wi-Fi is good enough on my phone plans with T-Mobile that it can still run a Zoom decently. It's still actually considerably above the minimal requirements. So that's why I have it as a hotspot. It's for the laptop, but yes, I can pick up from the Zoom app on my phones as well if I need to.
Nice.
Perfect.
Really good question.
So you talked about like some past clients, you're getting some new clients, you're working in some areas that you haven't worked in before. So how are you reaching out for business in the world of quarantine and coronavirus?
So the first thing that I did was I paused the contract with my salesperson. First thing I did. And we had a good conversation. I mean, we had a great relationship, and I told her, you know, any seeds that she sowed, if I get business based on those, she's still getting commission on that. I said, but right now, and this is before I started getting clients, this is when the cancellations were first rolling in. I said, you know, I've got to stop the bleeding first, you know, and so I have to minimize expenses. And I did in my personal and my business. Even though I would have been fine for a while, I just believe in being as strategic as possible. So she understood, she was okay. But even if it wasn't about budget, because I could have afforded to keep her. It did not feel right to me, I'm not judging anybody else, to keep doing outreach and cold calls. And it just did not feel in alignment with how I wanted to be perceived. Okay. So she's paused. So none of those external calls are going on right now. Although, interestingly enough, I just landed a huge video contract thanks to her legwork beforehand. So she's still getting paid from that. So yay. Okay, that's good.
Yay for everybody.
Yes. But what I did was I got on the phone with my assistant, who's, you know, her contract's still in effect. And I said, look, I want you to understand where the business is, because she doesn't keep my accounting. I said, if we don't get another piece of business, I can pay you till the end of the year. The business will be fine. So we have plenty of money set aside in the business. I said, so now that we know, and I want you to know that you're okay, our job right now is to bring as much kindness as possible to everybody we've ever worked with. Our job is to make sure they're okay and supported. That's it. I want you to think of yourself as a fairy godmother. If you talk to somebody and you're like, Crystal, based on something they said, anybody who saw me at Winter Conference will know where I'm going with this. If they're stressed out and you know they love chocolate chip cookies, buy them some chocolate chip cookies on my account. Do that. So we actually started sending out gifts when most people are, you know, saving, and I saved in other areas. But, you know, I mentioned Winter Conference. I had the bacon client I mentioned jokingly. And so I reached out to him, and he was in a really interesting situation with multiple businesses that were all being hit at once, and all these employees, and one of the kindest people. And so I made him this really crazy bacon meditation basket, right? With like bacon. I found bacon candles, a bacon coloring book. So we sent that to him. I had another client who was a third-party planner. And she was like, Crystal, this is crazy because I'm dealing with so many cancellations and all the vendors, and it's too much. And so she was just talking about how tight her back was. So I went online and I found her a chair back massager, and I sent it, you know, we mailed it over to her on Amazon. And she called back maybe 3 days later, and in the background you hear, and she said, oh my God, Crystal, thank you so much. And so that's what we did. We just started reaching out saying, are you okay? Do you need anything? What's going on? And it wasn't about business. Regina, my assistant, she knew it wasn't about business. We are not soliciting for business. We just want to make sure everybody's okay. We've been given the grace where we don't have to stress out right now. So let's get everybody else okay. And lo and behold, just from reaching out, just seeing if people are okay, you know, people were telling me their stories. I had bureau people that were literally telling me about their marriage issues that were happening as a result of this. I just let people talk, whatever they needed. I was there. Whatever they needed, Regina was there. And then lo and behold, like after those conversations, a few days later, and I didn't expect this to happen, people came back and said, well, Crystal, are you doing videos now? Well, Crystal, can you do this? And I wasn't putting it out there that I did any of those things, but it was just being a decent human. And that's what we've continued to do, just checking in on people. Are you okay? Well, you know, a couple weeks ago, things sounded rough with your kid. How's your kid doing now? And it's, again, it's not about getting business, but I'm finding that the more we care, the more business we get. That's it.
Absolutely.
We're just reaching out, making sure people are okay. And if someone needs, you know, resources for teaching kids at school, I mean, I know enough people, we're all very well networked as speakers. I connect people. Okay, well, here's a resource from Mennonite Church USA that might help you, even though you're this financial planner, right? Or here's PPP information, and here's what's interesting is the bacon client was the one who told me the best avenue to go about getting the PPP, and actually got it. So all these different, just being a decent human is how business is coming in. That's it.
So what are you, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, what are you finding? I'm not talking exact numbers, but what are you finding kind of across the board? You mentioned, hey, I got one client and that was full fee. What are you seeing? You're talking to a lot of people, or are people thinking half of normal? Is there anything?
Everywhere. Okay, so let's say that my normal fee is 20 pineapples. Okay, so I've been paid everything from, if my normal fee is 20 pineapples, I've made everything from 20 pineapples to 4 pineapples. It's a range. And I think the question you just have to ask is, what is your budget for this project? And if they say, oh, I don't know, what do you think? I try to explain to them. I say, look, this is not like a stage appearance. Like, the levels that I can go through a video production are very different. If you want me to just sit in front of a webinar, that's an hour. If you want me to produce an hour video, there's many more hours that go into that. And I have to pay a video guy to edit it. On top of that, there's different levels of video editing too. We can put in B-roll. We can do this and that. I have to have a budget, or I can't help you. No, they have to give me I tell them, you have to give me a number. Because otherwise, if you say, I just need a car, how much is a car? I can give you a Kia. I can give you a Porsche. You know, like, where are we going with this? I can give you a Maserati. So, you know, just really making them give you a number, because otherwise it's going to waste your time, because you're going to throw out a number and they're going to say, and then can you get lower? No, I'm not going to play a guessing game. So just very kindly insisting that they give you a number. Otherwise, you don't know what you're working with.
Well, and if people have more questions, the last episode we did on last Thursday with Phil Jones was like a study on how to have that conversation. So we'll direct you right back there.
Yeah, Phil's brilliant. And I think, you know, we have to keep in mind that another thing I'm seeing is a lot of this free, right? And I don't think there's anything wrong with doing things for free if you're testing something out. You know, if you're literally telling them, you're going to be my guinea pig. and the client that I did the 2 custom ones from the beginning, I also let them know I was testing something on them too. So they knew that, right? So they win, I win. But don't think that your value went away because you're not showing up on a stage. You know, one of my clients, you know, he talked about, do you know how much money we're saving right now? Now, some of us lost money on events, he you know, but right now on upcoming things, he said, do you know how much money we're saving not having to do food, not having to pay for a venue?
Yeah.
We have money. Like, clients have money. And this was not, he's representing a group that most people would not think ever have money. So a group that typically people would think doesn't have money is saying, no, we have money. It's out there. The question is, do they value you enough to pay you?
So that brings up an interesting question for me. Is, do they value you enough? How do you talk about the value you provide when you're having that conversation?
Well, keep in mind, I'm dealing with incoming leads. So if it was outgoing, it would be a little bit different. If it's incoming, they already see some value. So I'm not really trying to communicate. You see what I'm saying? I'm not trying to, but I do talk about, one thing I'm known for is a large degree of customization. So even for these webinars, the level of customization they're seeing, they all have commented. I have testimonial letters from multiple clients just over these past 10 or so weeks talking about, holy moly, I can't believe what you put into this and the level of research you did. And so they know that, okay, if these are 3 objectives you say you want accomplished, these are the 3 things we're going to get done by the end. So the question is, do you value these 3 things you said you wanted? I can deliver them. And I mean, it's a simple conversation. Again, we're all different. There's no, I'm not saying the way, I'm sharing my way. And so I kind of, free tends to have a bad taste in my mouth unless there's a strategic reason for it.
That makes a lot of sense. All right, so we know what we need to have sort of as the minimum. Somebody did have a question about your background in terms of how big is it?
Okay. So this background is 7 by 5. I have many backgrounds at this point. I would say 7 by 5 is the smallest you'd want it to be, because this is still big enough where sometimes I stand up during presentations. I can still move a little bit. So that works. But I mean, they get much larger than this, but 7x5 is the smallest you want. You need at least 7 feet across to move.
And where do you get photos printed on cloth?
So you can, okay, so if you want to do your own, you just have to kind of do a search for it. And right now with shipping and different companies, it's weird. But a lot of times there's local printers near you that'll print on vinyl. And a lot of these are made out of vinyl. And so you just have to find a local printer and ask them if they do vinyl prints. It's just like sign printing. So any place that'll print a sign, any place that'll print a sign will print this. Same thing.
And then is it really helpful? Is it really helpful to have a husband who's a professional photographer? Is that one of his images behind you?
It's definitely helpful. I will say he's had me cracking up the other day. So I put up my whole setup before a webinar and had everything angled. And he came in. He said, "Hey, do you need my?" He said, "Oh, you've grown up. You don't need me anymore." now I can do a lot of it by myself. But for instance, when I start doing this video series, obviously I need help. So no, it's definitely helpful. But this isn't something that everyone can't do. His knowledge came in more so in how to do the initial setup and lighting. So like not in here, I'm in my office, but like for when we get into the set level, I have like 6 or 7 different lights. That's his expertise. So anyone can do this. You don't have to go marry a photographer. I mean, it's a good move. It's a good move. I think I made a smart decision here, but you don't have to.
We all don't necessarily have to. Sean had a follow-up to the question about pricing and just asking for your opinion that they're not getting us in person.
Mm-hmm.
So does that warrant a decrease in value?
No. Here's the thing.
Cool.
You have to look at what clients are willing to pay. So I just said I had a full fee event last week. They saw the value and I delivered the value and yay. And so at the end of the day, I don't know if we can take a hard line on this right now. Things are so new and honestly, people have to pay bills. I'm fortunate. I don't have children. I don't have anybody in college. I'm in a really easy position, relatively speaking. I'm not going to tell somebody that has 2 kids in college or that has 5 children that you can't lower your fee. You do what you need to do. But do not assume, don't go into a conversation assuming you're going to have to lower your rate. Start at your rate, whatever. I would say I'm going to quote my normal rate every single time. And I mentioned this during winter conference for those of you that saw me, but I'm doing the same thing with this. If they say, okay, you normally charge 20 pineapples, we only have 13 pineapples, I'll say, well, I'll tell you what, we can do it for 13 pineapples, but I'm going to need 7 pineapples worth of non-monetary concessions to make up the difference. And I assign a financial value to the concessions I ask for. So it might be being able to plug my book. That's not something I've done yet, but I'm giving you examples, okay? It may be you need a testimonial letter. It may be that you need, if it's a state level organization, you want them to introduce you to 3 other states that they know have needs similar to their own. You want them to do a testimonial letter and email those states and CC you in the conversation, whatever that is.
Right.
Put that in the contract and assign a financial value to each and every one of those concessions until it equals 7 pineapples. And then have a clause in there in the event the client, or something along the lines of the client understands that these concessions are in lieu of the normal monetary payment. If the client fails to produce these non-monetary concessions within 30 days of the event, the client will be billed for the amount. Now, you're not doing it because you plan on billing them. I mean, you might have to, but typically billing them just means they get it to you. So if they get the bill, they're like, oh, you asked me twice. I guess I should do this, because once they get the bill, they have to turn it over to accounting, right? So it's just a little safety measure. Don't assume. I don't care what kind of group it is. I don't care if it's a church group. I don't care who it is. Don't assume they don't have 20 pineapples. They might have 30 pineapples.
So we have 2 kind of technical questions in the Q&A. One is, in your opinion, do you need a professional set for a virtual keynote, or could you do it from your office?
I don't think you do. I think well, let me put it this way. It depends on your client's expectation. At the end of the day, you have to know what your client's expecting. So you have to ask the client, okay, what does a virtual keynote look like to you? And listen, just be quiet. What is your vision for this keynote? Because no, seriously, I was having a conversation in one of our groups the other day, And someone's like, how do you define a virtual keynote versus a webinar? I'm like, I don't. The client does. If the client says, I want you sitting down at a desk in front of a laptop and it's a keynote, they're paying me. Okay, it's a keynote, so however they want to label it. So if you ask them, what does this look like to you? How do you envision it on my end? What do you want to see? They'll tell you. So then if they're expecting a professional set, now you know. And the interesting thing is if you're in a city that's partially open, you might be able to get to a local business where you can use a set where they already have one created. Or, you might have to create something then. At the same time, they might envision a keynote as, do you have a couch in your house? I'd love for this to be more laid back, like a conversation. You don't know. So ask them what they're expecting and don't feed them anything. Just be quiet and don't make extra work for yourself or stress.
Another person has a question about, do you then, when you have this gorgeous background, do you then share your screen to do PowerPoint, or are you using Prezi? And they would like to see, if it's not too much trouble, what that looks like.
Oh, they want to see one? Okay, it might take me a quick second. I'm trying to make this happen on the fly. I didn't see this one coming, but let's see how fast I can do it. One moment.
Something tells me you'll be able to show us something pretty cool in just a couple of seconds. I have lots of faith in you, Crystal.
I do what I can for the people. Hold on. I'm going to make this work. It's just going to take a second because I'm going to have to change my camera to do this. But
so while she's looking for that, I just want to share. It's interesting because Eliz has like her office as the background. She has that really cool photo behind her. I've sort of taken a wall and some of my logos and made a makeshift thing. And I'm always worried people aren't going to like mine. And I did a webinar the other day and the client's like, I love your background. It's different. It's unique. It's professional. So I think all of the above works. I don't think people's expectations is just one thing.
Okay, so I have to turn off my camera here for a moment.
Sure.
To make this work.
She disappeared. Oh no.
I know, I'm still here though. I promise I'm still here. I didn't leave you, beautiful people. I didn't leave you. Okay.
Well, and we appreciate your ooh, look at that.
I wouldn't use this on this background because the color contrast isn't enough. But to give you an idea, so what I do is I just keep it on my camera because I'm using Prezi Video, as I mentioned. After I talked to Brian, he was like, as much as you use Prezi, why don't you just do Prezi Video? And I was like, oh, you genius, man. So yeah, I just go through it. So give you a quick, very, very quick, because some of you already saw Brian Fanza, so he talked about it. But I can go through it like this. I can talk about stuff. I can point to things. I can go back to me real quick, talk, come back here. So that's what I've been doing to give you an idea.
Does Prezi Video work only on Mac, or is that a PC option as well?
No. So, I'm all about the technology that's practical. I'm not a Mac. And the reason I'm not, I know, right? My husband's Mac. He's a photographer. I get it. I think they're beautiful, lovely machines. Although I think there's some user experience issues and I don't really care for a few of them. But the reason I'm PC is because most of our AV people that we deal with are PC. And I've seen way too many people with Macs crash and burn. And I know people like, you just have your dongle and you embed your text and your video into your keynote, even though I'm not doing that. I want my stuff to work. And so I have a PC, and on top of that, I use Prezi. I'm Prezi Video right now, but Prezi, because it's self-contained file, and whether I send it to a PC or a Mac, they actually cannot mess up my file. It's impossible. So it always runs well. So I'm going to get this off my screen now that I gave you all a sample. It's going to take me just a moment to get rid of the little presentation thing and come back normal. But hopefully that was helpful, and I fulfilled what you needed on the fly there.
No, that was great. I know for me, because I've been struggling to find a way to be able to do that. And I also am a PC user for the same reason you are.
Yeah, but it works on PC or Mac. So, yeah.
That's really cool.
Go to town. And if you're somebody who already uses Prezi, using Prezi Video isn't a huge learning curve. There's some shifts, but it's not terribly different.
So let's move on a little bit to sort of how then, now that you've got the client and you've got the technology, how do you produce your virtual events? What are you doing? What's your daily routine to work with clients now?
So I'll go through a few things that I suggest that you do on your end and in preparation that I think will be helpful to everybody. I've learned some best practices now along the way. So a few things I would suggest as a speaker. You always want to have, if you're using your laptop, you want to have the link to the Zoom pulled up in another window at all times. So if for any reason it goes down, you can click it right back within seconds. You always need that up. Number two, you need to have at least one hotspot handy. If it's not your phone, if your phone, test your phone test using your phone's Wi-Fi on your own Zoom and see how it looks with somebody else. Record it, see the quality. If it's not good enough, you might have to purchase a hotspot.
Those aren't very expensive though, right?
No, they're not terribly expensive. And the question you have to ask yourself is how expensive would it be if someone paid you for a webinar and it went down and your internet went down? We actually have a peer, an NSA that happened to, and he moved so quickly, thank goodness. He had like a storm happen like right before his Zoom was supposed to start, this paid Zoom with a client, and it just knocked out his power, completely, his power. Luckily, it charged his laptop, and he was able to use his phone as a Wi-Fi source. Because when your power goes out, guess what you don't have? Normal Wi-Fi in your house.
That's true.
So yeah, I would suggest that. Let's see. Oh, give your client a phone number that they can text you on. So if anything weird happens with chat or whatever, you can have that up. And I have a little stand I have my phone on so I can see if they text me outside of chat. Sometimes there's something they don't want the other panelists to see, or it's harder for them to move around. They might be frozen. They might go down. I've actually had that happen. It was really interesting where the client, their system, like they went down. And so then I had to take over the webinar when they were supposed to be doing part of their presentation beginning for the internal company. And this was actually a Fortune 100 company. And it was a meeting of all of their planners all over the world. So it was really funny. I was like, so here's what we're going to do. And I just carried on, and they were eventually able to get back on, but it took them a while. You definitely want to turn off anything near you that makes noise. I know we tend to think about that, but your phones, anything you can think of, your fan, whatever can potentially make noise. Your children, if you need to tie them up and put them in a closet temporarily with some snacks, get baby snacks, okay? Whatever you need to do to get it quiet in there, do it, okay? So those are things I think you should do beforehand. In terms of the actual virtual event, let's look at webinars specifically, okay? Because that's what I have most experience in. I haven't really done any streaming yet, although I have a streaming project coming up. What I have learned to do is I send out a questionnaire beforehand, similar to the questionnaire that we send out before physical events. And it's our 80 checklist, and we're asking a lot of questions. And so I would encourage you, and actually, you know what, if y'all don't mind, in the chat right now, because you might be able to, let's kind of pull together and see if we get some answers. Think about all the questions. Type in a question that you'd want to ask that you want to ask the client before the webinar. So think, brainstorm, and I'll give you some examples as you're thinking of your contribution to this conversation in the chat. So you might ask, who is the host of the webinar? Or can you send me their bio? You might ask them to confirm the start and stop time in your time zone and be very specific about your time zone. We're also seeing, Frank said, how many attendees? John said, what has not worked for you in the past? A sound check time. So yes, so you all right here getting all the stuff you need. What is your hashtag? Because that's also important, because I have people do like contests and stuff with hashtags while we're in some of their meetings. If it's not like a high level secretive type meeting, sometimes you're not supposed to let information get out. So
Gary had a good one. What level of tech do your participants have?
Oh, that's so good. I mean,
that's a really good one.
Y'all want to read some of these? These are really good. You want to read them out, maybe?
Sure.
Where are people calling in from?
Are there other presenters before me or after me? That's a great one to know.
Yes.
Oh, Jerry said, who is your sponsor? Let me tell you something.
Oh, man.
So the group that paid me full fee, y'all are going to love this. I asked them about sponsors, and they said, yeah, we have 3 big ones. I said, how do they feel about this right now, being that this was supposed to be an in-person, because they did like these monthly meetings. And I said, they normally sponsor those, right? She's like, yeah, it's getting harder to get the sponsors to sign up because it's about time for renewal. I said, how about we do something to give them a little sunshine during the webinar? And they're like, what do you have in mind? I said, I'm going to make a game show. Like I was basically channeling Brian, I was like,
yeah, good.
channeling Brian. And I was like, Brian Walters. I was like, let's make a game show. And I created this whole game show, and we were using polling. So basically, we took a representative for each of their sponsors. We had their names on there, their company names, and it was 3 questions. And people got to vote on their favorite answer to the 3 questions, right? So they give their answers 30 seconds. A buzzer would go off if they went too long. Then everybody would vote on their favorite answer. 2 serious questions, not hard. So serious, where they got a chance to show their expertise and give advice to everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And the last question was just plain ridiculous, right? Like literally when I said it, they were like, is that even what? And so their answers were so silly. And at the end, the winner was everybody, because we had a chance to learn from them. The client was so blown away. They were like, our sponsors were so tickled to be included. They actually felt like they had more attention on them than they would have at the normal event, because everyone's listening to them at once. It's fun. They didn't have to give a speech. So I think asking about sponsors is brilliant, because you can figure out, how do you give them a little sunlight? How do you make this fun? Because right now, organizations, especially associations, are struggling to get those sponsors on board. So those are really great.
So one of the other questions that was on there is, do you ask your client, is this going to be recorded for rebroadcast for people who might not have been there live? That's a great question. And then it comes to my mind, does that affect your pricing?
Yeah, so I do ask that. At this point, I've not charged anyone more for that, because at this point, they weren't selling the recordings. They were making them all available kind of behind a login area, the ones that were making it available. So if they were continuing to sell it or something, yes. My only condition is I need to get a copy of that. I need a copy of the chat. I need a copy of the questions. I also need them, if they do any after event surveys, I need to have some specific questions included in that as well, so that I can, see how I'm doing and get ratings as well. So it's cool, because that event I just told you all about with the sponsors, they were so excited. I got 5 out of 5 ratings from everybody. And they were like, Crystal, do you speak on anything else? Because we love you.
You're like, yes.
I love you too. I can talk about it. What as long as it's connected to technology, I'll talk about whatever you want me to. So these are great questions.
Yeah, we had one more from Lenora about, will there be a producer on their end if you're using their platform?
So
yeah.
That's a great question. So it's funny, that was going to be one of my next things I was going to, so Lenora's, of course she is. She's ahead of the game on this one.
Always.
I don't ask, I tell them. So before we come together, because no one's needed me to do it on my platform yet. They all have their own platforms for security reasons or whatever else. And so I tell them, I need 2 people minimum on your team. So I'm driving this. I'm literally huddling them and telling them what we need. I say, we need 1 person who's going to produce or be the technical person. Their only job is to run the platform. I need them. They're going to be the person who launches polls. They're going to be the person that if someone gets in a chat and says they're having a technical issue, they fix that. All they do is make sure the platform runs. I said, additionally, I need a host. The host will introduce me. The host will also have conversations with me during the webinar. Because here's the thing, if I take questions a couple times in the webinar, which I normally do, so I usually take questions 2 to 3 times in an hour's worth of time, to me, it looks funky if I say, okay, well, let's see what questions we have.
Right.
No, so what I say is, okay, host Kathy, let's go ahead and take 3 questions from, everybody that's listening right now. Give me 3. So then Kathy says, well, one question is, it's smoother and it's a conversation, and I'm not clicking around because I have a presentation next to me, right? Yeah. And so I do at least 2 people. If it's a big enough group, I'll ask for 3. And the reason why is we might have the host, but we also might have a reporter on the street. Because if we have 500 people, those are a lot of questions to field. The host job really is to keep the program going the way it's supposed to go, right? I'm the speaker, right, but they're in charge of the program. So then the reporter on the street, then I turn to them and ask questions. And they're the ones fielding if it's enough people. So I think Lenore is definitely onto something, but I require a minimum of 2.
Maura Thomas asked a question that, do you have a VA on your side? Then you have the people on their side. Do you have someone on your side helping you with the tech, and which do you prefer?
So my assistant is on them. She's not helping me with the tech. I haven't needed her to yet. She's more than capable. I mean, Regina is one of the most technical people I know. So she's capable, she's there. But right now I just kind of have her on. So if anything goes left, Regina's kind of like, it's kind of like I'm employing Superwoman. So if something went left, she just finds solutions. That's just what she does. And she thinks fast. So she's there in case of whatever. So we haven't had to use her yet, but she's like my secret weapon, if you will.
So talking about having a host, and I think Eliz and I will tell you we're very pro having hosts running webinars.
We are.
Yeah, we're very pro that. A good question that I saw in here is your introduction any different for a virtual than it is for a live one? And that comes from Kevin O'Connor. That was a really good question.
That is.
So my introduction is different depending on the client, but I have had them use the same introduction that I use on stage. So here's the thing. I actually have a video introduction. I haven't used that on a webinar because it's too much. Okay. So like for a keynote, it works because it's silly and there's all this, and there's a big booming voice. It's just amazing, right? It's good energy and silly. So no, I don't do that. That's a bit much for a webinar. But the verbal introduction, when some clients are like, so I don't use the video if it's 150 people or less. I even tell the client that 150 people or less, my introduction video is too much. I'm going to look like a big-headed jerk. Let's not do this. So they do typically still use the same introduction because there's a lot of humor and it's silly, but I might change it a little bit to say, you know, the newly branded Wizard of Webinars, because she's not going anywhere. You know, so we'll keep a few little jokes in there, switch it up. But for the most part, yes, because my introduction is not amazingly long anyways, because I just don't like those. So yeah.
I like that. We have a couple more questions in Q&A. One, Helen wants to know if you worry about your clients or participants acquiring your slides and content or reusing them from the recording.
No, but keep in mind that I was probably years ago, I was walking against the grain where I would always give copies in my presentation. Like it was just a part of being in the audience. I'll send you a PDF copy of exactly what you see on the screen. Some people create these intricate handouts and I think it's beautiful, but my presentations are so personalized and customized that it's not like I have the same 3 presentations I give over and over again. It doesn't work. And I don't have time to create a handout or the desire, if I can be honest, to create a handout for every single just being honest. And so you get a PDF copy of my notes. And if somebody wants to take this PDF copy of my notes and pretend to be Crystal and do their thing, more power to you. I speak on technology. It changes so fast. It's going to be outdated in a matter of weeks. So do you.
Very good. I like that. Also, a little more question about your setup. Do you have multiple monitors or are you just off of your laptop?
So actually, technically, I have multiple monitors. Like when I'm on a webinar, oftentimes I have my other laptop up so that if I have to jump, plans A through D.
As does everybody who watches webinars. Yeah.
Yeah, plans A through D, right? So I have another one. I didn't mention that because, again, I don't want anyone in here who has one laptop to think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I don't have an extra screen. Oh, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine. You're fine. You're fine. So I do have an extra one that I kind of watch to see like audience view and things like that. But yeah, I don't typically switch. I mean, I know there's all this wonderful software that'll allow you to switch between screens. I think it's great. But again, I believe in minimal issues happening. And so I try to keep it as simple as possible. Like I know there's OBS. There's a bunch of them that people are using to switch back and forth. Ecamm. I think they're beautiful. I think they're absolutely beautiful. And I think people that are comfortable with those and feel, you know, that they're not going to have any issues, I think they should use them. I will say, first off, I couldn't use Ecamm if I wanted to because I'm PC. And then regarding OBS, I think I have a really good pattern going right now. I understand how it works. I've looked into it. For me, I don't need it, but it might be crucial to someone else depending on how their presentation is set up and what their visuals are. So you have to do what works for you.
So piggybacking on the Ecamm discussion, because I know this comes up, it seems like every episode. How are you using the Prezi video? I mean, what's the thing? Do you need an additional thing to use Prezi video with your presentation?
No. Okay. So basically the way it works is imagine pulling up PowerPoint on your, let's use PowerPoint example because everyone's familiar with PowerPoint or Keynote. So imagine you pull up the program for it. So I'm pulling up Prezi video as a program. And I say, okay, I'm going to pull which presentation am I going to use? I choose the presentation and then I go ahead and I
We just froze.
We just froze.
She's going to go to her hotspot, though.
Right. And she'll be back.
Zoom, I just have to change.
Oh, there she is.
Oh, I froze to you?
You froze.
Yes.
Oh, no. Okay, well, luckily I have the other thing ready. But my point was that, yeah, so basically it's just a camera. So once you hit broadcast, that's what I was doing when I was doing it really quick. All I do is go into Zoom and I select a different camera. And there's a Prezi video camera. And it takes the other camera I have, it overlaps. So it's just changing cameras. It's actually a very simple program to use once you understand how to build the actual presentation. It's not hard to connect it.
Is it expensive to buy?
I don't know. No, it's not expensive to buy. It's a monthly fee, and I've had them so long, I'm kind of grandfathered in. So I'm not 100% sure what the fee is right now for it, but I'm fairly certain it's not very expensive. It's not going to break anybody.
So Crystal, as we wrap this up, and this has been so useful, thank you so much for just sharing so honestly. Do you have any last words of advice sort of around this idea of your tech and your tactics for your short-term survival, keeping it in that short term? Any last tidbits?
Avoid looking at other people's stuff and trying to emulate it or feeling like you are not enough. Your clients are buying your magic sauce. Everyone's magic sauce is different. And so your magic sauce, you may not have a studio set up and instruments and things like that, but you might be a master at creating games through polls. You might be a master at facilitating breakouts. You might have a whiteboard and just the way you get people to think differently as they're seeing you write, that might be what they're buying. It's not about the technology. No one has ever gone to a conference and seen a speaker who had a better setup and said, you know what? That speaker setup made them the best speaker of the day. You can have the best technology in the world, but if you suck, you still suck, right? And I'm not saying anyone sucks, but what I'm saying is that get the content down, understand what the client wants. And as long as you deliver what they want, don't get caught up in the flashy, get caught up in just making sure that you're delivering you authentically and hitting those objectives you agreed to. That's all you have to do. You don't need every new piece of technology. You don't need to figure out how to do a gazillion different things. You just need to know how to use the platform well and know how to communicate whatever it is you're supposed to be communicating to the client. That's it. You're good.
That is the message I needed to hear. So thank you so much. And I'm just going to pay attention to my magic sauce. And I think everyone should listen to that advice. That's awesome.
That is. Crystal, thank you so much. This was, you delivered on what you set out to deliver, tech and tactics for short-term survival. I actually think it's probably more longer-term survival as well, because what you gave us was just a way of looking at how we're running our businesses. And thank you very, very much.
So Eliz, what's going to happen this week? We have another one. What's happening on Thursday?
Tammy Evans and Brian Walter will be here talking about how to actually be engaging with people on this setup.
Very interactive tips. We're going to be back into Zoom meetings.
Yes.
We are going to run the most interactive session I'm going out on a limb, you've probably ever participated in. Eliz and I have seen behind the curtain. You want to make sure you're here Thursday. You tell all your friends to be here Thursday, because if you think being interactive, that you could be more so. I think Tammy Evans and Brian Walter, I think they've got the answers.
And maybe you didn't have enough warning when we were all with our cameras on with Phil Jones. You have no excuse this time. They want your cameras on, so be ready on Thursday for that.
I will do my hair.
Very nice. And a little note about next week. Monday is Memorial Day, so that Memorial week is a little different. So we only have a session on Thursday. Rory and AJ Vaden will be with us. So nothing on Monday because it's Memorial Day. Thursdays, you're going to join us for Rory and AJ. Yes.
But on Tuesday, we're going to have a special chat going on in the Facebook page.
Absolutely.
And so that'll be sort of a community chat that they will post a question that we all can log on and answer. So make sure you check in with Facebook on Tuesday, even though you won't have Eliz and I here on Monday with an interview with somebody as awesome as we did today.
So awesome. Thank you so much, Crystal.
Thank you, Crystal. I am loving Influence 2020. How about you?
Me too.
How about all the rest
All
of
right.
you? You're loving Influence 2020? Go over and let us know on the Facebook page what's been some of the stuff you've learned that you've put into practice. And we are going to see you Thursday with Tammy Evans and Brian Walter.
See you then.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.